Adcorp CEO Richard Pike joins us on Business Tonight now, always welcome in the studio. He's here, that means he's not sleeping out. Richard, did you get a sick note from the doctor?
Yeah, actually, I'd love to be sleeping out, but I am travelling, and so, yeah, just
you
didn't work.
schedule your trips strategically.
Yeah. So
Richard,
I'm off
thank
to
you
Japan,
for your time. But we're not here to grill you about the sleep out, but
Great.
rather to talk about the broad labour environment in South Africa.
Yeah.
And in the previous conversation with Mark, we touched a little bit on the gold sector. And interestingly, today there's news coming out that, you know, on the brink of the gold wage negotiations, there's been a gold social pact that's been put together. The unions have come out and say, we don't want a social pact, we want money.
Yeah.
Is this, you know, perhaps one of the most accurate reflections of the South Africa labour environment right now?
Yeah, you know, we've seen massive wage inflation for many years, and wage inflation has outstripped consumer inflation. Now, that is not necessarily a bad thing. You actually want prosperity, you want people to be uplifted and the like. But there's a big but, and the but is that if you're going to get wage inflation that outstrips consumer inflation, it has to be coupled to productivity improvements. And I think that's the disconnect that we have in our economy, and that disconnect we've lived with for a long time, to the extent that not only has labour become more expensive, but it's become essentially less productive. And so the gap is much wider than it would appear on the face of it. And so where you have these kind of compacts, and Germany is an interesting economy post the Second World War, they ended up compacting around that, and you've seen massive prosperity in an economy like that, but coupled to productivity.
It seems, you know, it seems almost too good to be true, the German model, where they got trade unionists on the boards. They said, we're in this together.
Yeah.
Shares, more shares owned by the workers.
Yeah.
I mean, that you'd think would fit in with our alliance with COSATU and the anti. I mean, it shouldn't seem that far away from us.
I think we live with a lot of history, and I think there's a lot of mistrust. If you look at the social dialogue between business, labour and government, I don't think there's a whole lot of trust. And the other problem that you have is a compromise whereby you have labour in a political alliance with government. So government can't be honest broker. And I think, you know, I'm not anti-unions, but I'm anti-alliances of those kind of nature, because I think they compromise the social dialogue.
And if we just look at Adcorp and we look at your growth by acquisition strategy, one could say that it seems as if you're moving more and more away from South Africa if we look at the weightage of your revenue flows. Are we losing investment and investment play because of our labour environment?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. You know, I think our move has been both defensive but also offensive. We've seen a great opportunity in emerging markets, so we've taken advantage of that. But defensively, we were under huge cosh in 2011. There was threats of banning the industry in South Africa, and we had all our eggs in one basket and had to do something about it. So definitely, I think that you know, that is a factor. And the South African labour market is not a happy place at the moment. You know, there's nothing that I see on the horizon that's going to see jobs growing at any sort of fast lick. And it all comes down to economic growth. You know, that to me is the prerequisite. If you don't have economic growth, you're not going to have job creation.
But even when we did have economic growth in the earlier 2000s, it was jobless growth to a large extent.
And I think it's because you're seeing this, you know, effectively labour's pricing itself out of the market. And as I say, it's not only the wage issue, it's the productivity issue. If you have the two in combination, that's what you want. And I think that's the kind of direction that the social dialogue needs to take.
So just a day or two ago, we were celebrating or commemorating June 16, and whenever we start looking at the youth employment figures in the country, we get into another difficult conversation. You've got a bird's eye view over what other markets are getting right in terms of getting their young people transitioning from education into the labour market, rather. What would you move? What levers do you think need to be moved for us to begin to absorb more young people into labour?
Look, I think youth unemployment is a global problem. It's not only a South African problem, and it worries me. You know, if there's one thing that concerns me about labour markets generally, it's youth coming into the labour market. But I think we have particular problems. Education and training definitely are a problem. So the raw material we're producing through the education system is lacking in terms of, you know, ability, and there's no secret about that. But then also the training that we're doing, we're not training people that industry and business wants to consume. So, you know, everybody wants to send their kids to university. The reality is that we need artisans, we need welders, and those are not sexy and, exciting career options, and you know, I think we need to revive those. If I look at a country like Taiwan, it actually develops those kind of skills for export. So they develop them in excess to their own domestic requirement, and that's something that we should be looking at in South Africa, is trying to bring the sexiness back into those kind of vocational training programs.
You said you're off to Japan, so I suppose this reflects the new scale and range of the company.
Yeah, so about 45% of our business now is non-South African, and we've identified Africa, the Middle East, and the Asia-Pacific region as the place that we want to be involved in, and Asia is an important market from the point of view that statistically by 2030, 52% of the global workforce will be in Asia. So as a staffing company, if you're not there, you're kind of not at the party, and so that's been important for us. And it's very vibrant. You know, if you look at what's happening in those markets, quite exciting to see the growth and the prospects that we see in Asia.
Well, and we don't see the prospects here, do we?
Absolutely, and Richard, of course, has his doctor's note in hand. He is on his way to Japan tomorrow, and hence, this is why he's not at the CEO Sleepout. But a very big thank you to him giving us the insight there and a good overview of the South African labour environment, rather.